Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our April 15th, 2026 Board of Douglas County Commissioners work session. Just a quick reminder for anybody who's with us in person, who might be listening online, or who watches this later. Work sessions are for informational purposes only. This is an opportunity to receive information, for commissioners to ask questions and have some dialogue. With community partners, we always have a business meeting that follows this, which will begin at 5:30 p.m., where we always have a general public comment portion of our meeting, and that's an opportunity for anybody who wishes to make public comment about this to join us then. And with that, I will turn it over to staff to introduce our guests.
Thank you, commissioners. Today we're going to hear from the Douglas County Extension Council, and they're going to talk to us about just as a general overview of some of the services they provide and our partnership with them. So I'll turn it over to Marlon.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, commissioners. Thanks for having us here. We're excited to share with you an update on all things extension here in Douglas County. Marlon Bates, I'm the County Extension Director, and I'll let my colleagues at the table introduce themselves.
I'm Caitlin Piney, the Community Health and Wellness Extension Agent.
I am Nikki Harding, the 4-H and Youth Development Agent.
Sharon Ashworth, Horticulture and Natural Resources Agent.
My name is Margit Kaltenegger, Agriculture Agent.
As I work to get this shared correctly, and please somebody chime in if it's not in presenter mode. Okay, thank you. There we go. So as you know, we are close partners. So I think the word that we've used in the past is inextricably linked partners. So first, we just want to share some gratitude. Thank you for the support that you provide to us. It is immeasurable and critical to the operation of our work here in Douglas County. Before we get started, I know we introduced the extension agents that are here, but I also want to point to the folks that are in the gallery. So we have other staff members that are in the gallery with us. We also have board members who are in the gallery with us. And in addition to that, we also have volunteers who are in the gallery as well. So this is one of the best ways we like to share who we are with photos of everybody, shining faces, talking about all the program areas that we do and the little bit of administrative function that we have within our staff. So that top line that you see is the folks that are sitting right in front of you. Not quite in exactly the same order, but pretty close. Next is we've got Jenny Bernard, who's our Live Well Douglas County Executive Director, Nikki Kenneth, who's a program assistant with us, and Nancy Noyes, also a program assistant. We also have Hillary Cass, who's the coordinator of the Kaw Valley Farm Tour. So we'll talk a little bit about that here shortly. Bailey Kentling, who's behind me, she's maybe going to be taking some pictures today because she's our communications coordinator. Cheyenne Bartz is not with us. She's actually at the office holding down the fort. And Quinlan Carter is also back here. She's the Food Business Resource Navigator. Also on this slide is Candace Lavalette, who is not an extension employee, but is housed in our office. She's the Douglas County Fair Board Executive Administrator. And as you may know, we have a very close relationship with the Fair Board as well. So we actually do process a lot of their financial stuff, specifically around her pay, and then work on reimbursement, but we always sit on Fair Board meetings as well. So that's how we like to share who we are, but we also like to share this just because it kind of helps describe the sort of intricate funding that we weave in order to fund these positions. So you'll see some color coding here. You'll note the brown is for the extension agents, myself included. We're jointly funded by Kansas State University and our local Extension Council. The gold color represents folks who are exclusively employed by the Douglas County Extension Council. There are folks over on the right side of this screen who are green and gold because they're grant funded, and that grant funding comes to the Extension Council and funds those positions. And then Quinlan's position is actually grant funded, and they're actually an employee of Kansas State University, but housed here locally. We also have representation here of our volunteers. as well as Candace's position with the Fair Board. So hopefully this gives you some sense of not just our kind of hierarchy, for lack of a better term, but also kind of the weaving of the funding that comes together to bring all of this to fruition. What you don't see above that County Extension Director position is information about the Douglas County Extension Council. So this is a 24-member elected council that is representative of not just the entire county, but also of different interests within the county. So these are prescribed interests from the statute. You see those interests listed at the bottom of the screen. So there's these 4 program areas that the statute asks us to seek residents who have specific interest in these areas. So we have 6 members with agriculture and natural resource interests on our extension council. We have 6 members with family and consumer science or community health and wellness interests, 6 that are 4-H youth development oriented, and 6 that are more community and economic development oriented, for a grand total of 24 people. Those folks are each serving 2-year terms. So every year, half of them have terms that are ending. And so our election every year, we elect 12 members to the Extension Council. Some of those folks may be returning for a second term. And some of those folks may be terming out because you can only do 2 terms consecutively. Now, that Extension Council of 24 every year meets annually as prescribed by statute to elect a 9-member executive board. And that executive board is who we meet with on a monthly basis to conduct the business affairs of the Extension Council. And they, along with the Director of Extension at Kansas State University, are responsible for all funds related to Extension in each of our local units across the state. I hope that was clear. So we can't do what we do without the wonderful staff that we have, and certainly with the wonderful guidance that we get from not just that larger 24-member Extension Council, but also the 9-member Executive Board. But we'd be remiss not to mention that we have a wonderful bevy of volunteers who enjoy spending their time with us. One of the things that I mentioned in the written report is that, we don't just ask folks to come to us and help us do more. We invest in those volunteers, and certainly they do help us do more. They help us reach more people. They help us extend the resources of the university in a much more a broader way. But they also are prepared as they move away from us to do better and serve better in their community as they go on with their lives. So really these 3 primary program areas within 4-H, and then our Community Health and Wellness group has the Extension Master Food Volunteers, and our Horticulture group has the Extension Master Gardeners. 2 of those groups were actually at our office earlier today, doing their business meetings at the same time in separate spaces, but then they came together to do some continuing education around food gardening. So we had about 50 folks in the office, and they were all arriving about the same time I was trying to get to the radio stations, and felt like I was going the wrong way for a while. So of course we have these volunteers, but we also have a lot of community partners, and we just wanted to highlight that for you. Just earlier this year, we took stock of who are we partnering with, and maybe not an incredibly liberal interpretation of the word partner, but I think meaningful partnerships. So we've created a bit of a word cloud here. A lot of us across program areas are partnering with some of the same folks. So you'll see some of those, but we intentionally put Douglas County top left because you're our favorite partner. We have over 150 partners across all of our program areas, and we just wanted to let you know that the program areas that we have, we directly reached 18,000 people, educational contacts last year. We're going to get to the other staff here at the table in just a moment. They're going to share little highlights of what it is that they're up to, specifically as it relates to the things that you all care about. So we're trying to make sure that you see the connection, not just in the partnership, financial and otherwise, between the county and Extension, but also programmatically. But before we do that, I want to let you know, one of the last times we had a work session with you all was to share our initial strategic plan. And we have updated that. So that strategic plan expired in the end of 2025. So our executive board worked with us to update the elements of that strategic plan. And you can see here, we've got both operational themes as well as programmatic themes. The strategic plan in its entirety is available in the agenda item packet that you have, as is this quick little one-pager that has a QR code that'll take you straight to that. We think that there are a lot of important things that we are keeping track of here, ensuring that we're doing what we can to reach audiences, making sure that we're doing what we can in communication, engagement of that 24-member Extension Council and all of those program development committees, and also securing the funding that we need. Those program development committees are the shepherds of the programming elements of our strategic plan, and you'll hear a little bit about some of that as we share the microphone here shortly. So as I mentioned, we're interested in kind of highlighting the things that we think you care about with the things that we do. So this is a slide that just kind of shows maybe where that alignment lies. And so we're going to start with Caitlin, who's going to share about Health and Human Services work at the Extension Office.
Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into our community health and wellness program. Before I get started on this particular slide, I do want to acknowledge that K-State Extension and Douglas County actually also host our Communities Health Coalition with Live Well Douglas County, which actually really maximizes the work that we can do when we think about public health in Douglas County in collaboration specifically with our Community Health Improvement Plan, which you have seen myself as well as our Live Well Director, Jenny Bernard, back here in the back, come and talk to you a couple of times about different priorities for the current CHIP. So we're going to focus first on the anti-poverty work group. And for this particular group, both Jenny and I are involved in this work, but I want to highlight our efforts with the Guaranteed Income Pilot Program, more recently renamed as Douglas County Thrives. We have lots of different names flying around here, but really the intent with this pilot program is to have a focused population of single female head of households. And most recently, we were able to host a multi-agency sense-making project in collaboration with KU's Center for Public Partnerships and Research to really lift up and gather lived experience. There are lots of assumptions when we think about a single female head of household, specifically in Douglas County. Lots of agencies have sat around tables and attempted to share stories of their clients, but we knew that we need to have intentionality behind gathering that lived experience from folks who have walked in those shoes. And what could really be helpful in those specific scenarios is when we look at the opportunity for guaranteed income. So I want to give a shout out. I don't know if Jill's online or not. Okay, so I didn't tell her I was going to do this, but I want to thank her for her leadership with this particular group and guiding a smaller group of us to really dive into what guaranteed income could specifically look like in Douglas County and really gather that data to help us look at next steps for that particular project. Next, we're going to talk about food security. So Jenny and I are really probably known as the food security gals in the county when you think of the work that we do. So Jenny, our Live Well Executive Director, and myself are actually co-conveners for this particular work group. We also serve on the steering committee for the Community Health Improvement Plan, which allows us to really be a part of the planning process and the implementation of the CHIP. So we get to see all of the data and present data across the county for the community health needs assessment, and then work with a smaller group of folks to actually prioritize what that data is telling us and how we're going to move forward with these different work groups. So food security is one of the work groups. Jenny and I have the opportunity to convene and lead this particular group. So a couple of things for our food security priorities. I'm sure you've read through the plan in detail. There are lots of different intersecting strategies, but we definitely definitely look at increasing utilization of resources when we think of the free and reduced lunch program during the school day, also our women and infant children program and supplemental nutrition assistance program. I'm committed to not using acronyms, so there's a lot of words here. But we know that there's underutilization when we look at our poverty rates in Douglas County, and part of that is breaking down the stigma to apply and access services. Second here, we want to improve access to locally grown food. And we know that one of the strategies that actually threads throughout each of our priorities for the food security chip specifically is nutrition education. And I want to take just a moment to acknowledge that our team at K-State Extension actually lost a federally funded grant that allowed us to provide nutrition education to vulnerable populations free of cost. That grant had actually been coming to us in the form of our SNAP education grant since the mid-90s. So a really long time. I was probably in elementary school when we first got that. And that was a historically stable grant that we were able to secure and execute here in Douglas County, and unfortunately have lost that federally funded grant. And for the time being, there is an absence when we think about nutrition ed and what we're able to do with community partners specifically. We know that nutrition education is really equipping folks with the skills to cook at home and make those healthier choices personally. And we are definitely feeling a loss of that particular program. So next up, I will talk about our Extension Master Food Volunteers. So this is a group of 30 volunteers who actually go through extensive training. And this is also, when I talk about intersectional work, their main priority is actually working to combat food insecurity in Douglas County. And specifically, I want to lift up our effort here with the service that we provide with community partners to help folks apply for SNAP assistance specifically. So we actually go to where folks are. We realize that for people to organically come to the extension office to fill out a SNAP application probably isn't really reasonable. But you will see these folks monthly at community partners like Just Food, Heartland, Trinity Faith Pantry, and the Senior Resource Center. And before I give up my whopping 5 minutes of time here to highlight, I also want to acknowledge that really everything we do under the community health and wellness umbrella is done with a community partner or agency of some sort across the county. I would have to think really hard of an effort or a program that we do independently. We understand and are committed to the value of working with community partners, not duplicating work, and really lifting up and maximizing resources that we all have to bring to the table.
Okay, so I am going to just highlight when it comes to what the county goals are, that work readiness, that career readiness, and working with youth. This is we've got a captive audience, whether they're a traditional 4-H'er or a youth that we touch through the school system or through other partnered organizations through the summer. So we know career readiness is more than just the knowledge, right? The kids, they need to learn how to lead. They need to learn how to communicate and adapt as our world constantly changes. So that's where 4-H plays that critical role through all those hands-on, intentional skill building experiences that we can provide them for long-term success. One of the most powerful ways, and I don't think we really talk about this enough, a lot of times we're highlighting very specific programs, but just our basic 4-H project work and our record books. At its core, the 4-H project work gives youth the opportunity to explore their interests, hands-on, real-world experiences, whether it's agriculture, STEM, citizenship, the arts, whatever that project work might be for that individual. Then they take that ownership of their learning by setting goals, making decisions, seeing that project work through from start to finish, which is really important. And alongside that project work, kids are also in that traditional club setting or traditional 4-H experience. Kids are also meeting monthly, and they play an important role in their club meetings. These are really building some career readiness skills. They're practicing leadership by serving as officers, running meetings, and making decisions as a group. They build communication skills by giving monthly reports, sharing ideas, presenting in front of others. They also strengthen that teamwork, responsibility, and problem-solving skills constantly by working as a group and providing services to their community through service work or just teaching others about their project work. And then that record book brings all those experiences together. Through the record book process, youth set goals, track their progress, reflect on their experiences, and document what they've learned throughout the year. So this takes some real intentionality. And it's also a skill kids are learning, because when they start these record books, when they're 7 years old, they clearly have no idea really like, way does this affect me, right? But as they get older and they will stick with that experience, as they get ready to apply for scholarships, they can really see the impact that record book made. So they've just really learned to organize, manage their time, which is super, super important for kids as well. And just as importantly of those just everyday soft skills that those kids learn, their written communication skills also improve, because that record book includes writing a story, a reflection piece about that experience over the years. So in many ways, 4-H project work, club meetings, and record books mirror those real world expectations. They teach youth how to manage responsibilities, work with others, and lead and reflect and grow. So this time, now I'm going to hit a highlighted area that we really focus on, which several of you I know are aware of, our Citizenship Washington Focus Program, or otherwise known as CWF. Sorry about the acronyms. So it is a 4-H leadership experience specifically for our high school aged youth, 14 to 18, that develop those communication, leadership, and most importantly, I think, the civic engagement skills through hands-on learning. They explore the government, discuss real-world issues, and gain confidence in using their voice both in a professional and real-world environment. And I think what makes this experience, so our group will be sending a group this summer. They go to DC, but I think what makes this experience really impactful is that preparation leading up to the trip. They have to organize fundraisers, they have to organize service projects, and really we focus on building their understanding of the local, county, and state government before we head to DC for a week with them. So together, these experiences highlight the power of 4-H, project work, club meetings, and record books build reflection, organization, communication, leadership, and teamwork, while Citizenship Washington Focus builds civic understanding, confidence, and leadership at every level of government. So through 4-H, youth gain the skills, confidence, and mindset to succeed in their careers and make a difference in their communities in the future.
Yeah, this is something that, as an agriculturalist, agriculture producer, I'm really passionate about agricultural extension. Always have been. I've worked as a agronomist, consulting agronomist as well before I joined Extension. And so having been here now, 4 years, it's been great to kind of root in a bit and get to know the ag community. My background is in whole systems management, integrative ag. So I have the privilege of working with the row crop producers, livestock producers, and specialty crop producers at all levels. And one of the needs that I learned as I started was this passion we have in this county for soil conservation. There's a very strong conservation stewardship ethic, and it's a real privilege to work with the Douglas County Conservation District and our other partners with NRCS, the Forest Service, and our other local RAPS, which is a Wetland Restoration and Strategies Program, Protection Strategies Program, RAPS. That one, they help facilitate, incentivize growers to provide that sort of economic incentive to implement conservation practices, but we come in with more of the education and networking. So one of the first programs we started through Extension was the Whole Farm Health series that was promoting soil health and regenerative agriculture and helping farmers recognize their strategies to help mitigate soil erosion or increase carbon in the soil and water infiltration that will reduce the sedimentation in the Clinton Reservoir. That's always in the back of my mind as far as protecting that water source as our drinking water source for the community, and building the community network. So I like to work collaboratively, not only with our local community partners in the county, but reaching out beyond Douglas County and bringing in other state specialists or producers, experts that are even at a national level. So this picture up there is with Michael Thompson. We had the series of workshops this winter. He's the president of the Kansas Soil Health Alliance. He farms up in north central Kansas, where he gets about a third of the amount of water as we do normally in a good year, but he can still manage cover crops and rotational graze his cover crops and does an excellent job. So bringing someone in like him who can, testify to the effectiveness of this cropping planning, crop management system can just be an inspiration to our local farmers. And then they have a peer network that they can refer back to and build other networks outside. So it's been a privilege to work at that level and network even regionally or statewide, and then even some nationally. So we had the privilege of hosting Dr. Liz Haney this spring. She's a nationally recognized soil health expert, soil scientist, and she and her husband had developed already 10 years ago a very creative soil health test that accounts for biological function in the soil. And by understanding this test that she walked us through the parameters of that test, it actually can help producers like right away get a sense of how they could cut back on their fertilizer rates, which will then ultimately also reduce any runoff or nutrient load into our waterways. So all of these efforts are just a part of, like, just one picture, part of the work I do. I'm also starting this spring working with 2 producers some field trials to also look at fertility management to attack this invasive broom sedge, which is really just a fertility issue in our hay fields. But it's just an example of what I would like to be able to help farmers. We're hosting another field day tomorrow night on cover cropping as well with the Douglas County Conservation District. And this has all been informed and feedback with the producers. So it's sort of a give and take as we navigate how we can promote these practices. And then the other level, promoting specialty crop and supporting our regional food systems. Of course, as a specialty crop producer, having raised up to 20 acres of field-grown vegetables, it's a definite other area of passion. The Growing Lawrence Group is our local peer network in Douglas County that's been going some 20 years, and they have a great peer network of monthly meetings that I'm kind of a coordinator with them, and they do some professional development within that network and support one another. I'd also served on the Food Policy Council Network on the Farm and Food team, and I'm joining back on the Food Policy Council here this spring again for another round. And then I'm a board member of Kansas Specialty Crop Growers Association. So again, it's like regional, local, regional, state level. And then was chair last year for Great Plains Growers Conference, which is a 4-state land grant extension conference that we coordinate with Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, and Kansas, bringing in state specialists and then other nationwide networks of speakers and experts from Purdue or North Carolina, Kentucky, so that growers in our region can really get some of the best for education and extension information and networking and sharing amongst their community networks. So it's a great privilege to work with everybody. Sharon and I do share a little bit of the natural resource because it's one of our common areas. I can't ignore natural resource management for farmers managing land. They're inseparable. And so I'll be working with pollinator partners to try to look at some field days for pollinator habitat restoration in our farm buffer strips and, looking at how we can kind of hitch forces and work at that level too. So she's going to talk more about it. Thank you.
All right, Sharon Ashworth, Horticulture and Natural Resources. And I'm going to focus on the goal here of the heritage conservation and land management, just a piece of what that program is. So I brought some show and tell here. So this was something that came out of our strategic planning with our program development committee and working with the Douglas County Zoning and Codes, particularly Carl Bauer, we worked with and funded by the Heritage Conservation Council. We put together this resource guide for landowners. As you all are well aware, our county is populating. We have a lot of rural landowners there, a lot of them new rural landowners. And sometimes they get out there and they're thinking, oh, I got 20 acres now. What am I going to do with this? So that's where we come in with help. So this is a resource guide. And basically it's got a lot of our partners in there, a lot of information sharing on who they can contact for help. They want, depending on whether they've got a woodland they want to manage. So we tell them it's the Kansas Forest Service. And so a lot of times when I'm out visiting with these people, I'm connecting them with other resources and information so that they can best manage their land. So we connect rural landowners with land management resources and information. This publication is available at Douglas County, the Zoning and Codes Extension Office, and I also hand it out when I go out to visit landowners. So this we did start this not only with this publication, but we had an event last year that brought together land management agencies, businesses, nonprofits, so that the public could come in person and talk with people who were responsible for managing land. That was very successful, and it spawned a series now of land stewardship workshops. So this year we had the Living with Fire program. So we had 51 people attend, and we had speakers on why people do prescribed burning, why it is they want to do that for vegetation management, for brush control, for invasive species management. We also had the Kansas Forest Service come and do wildfire, I always say wildfire safety, how to protect your home during a wildfire. So that was very successful, and our future topics will include invasive species management, native vegetation management. Margit just talked about the pollinator issues. There's a lot of people out in the county that are interested in revegetating their area with native plants. So speaking of native plants, what we've been working on along with myself and the volunteers, the Master Gardener volunteers, is we have a great emphasis on planting natives in Northeast Kansas. And this is in high demand. A lot of people are interested in revegetating, whether it's their backyard or prairie acres are interested in that. So we have a series of guides on planting natives in Northeast Kansas that we give out quite often. I'm working on updating these with partners across the state now. We're going to take this statewide. So that's one of the projects. We also will be establishing a new Extension Master Gardener demonstration garden on the fairgrounds that will highlight native plants, how people can do their landscaping and gardening with native plants a lot of people are focusing on pollinators, but there's a lot of other advantages to native plants. We also have our Master Gardener native plant sale coming up May 30th. And at that program, we started out in 2022 with 300 people attending. Last year, 980 people. We had lines around the block to buy native plants. We will have over 10,000 plants, and we'll probably serve about 1,000 people this year with this interest in native plants. Now, I, along with the volunteers, do a lot of other horticulture programming, and that's how we get the information out to the public, is through our volunteer organization. They hold workshops, monthly meetings. We are there. We have a hotline 3 days a week. People come in with their dead or sick plants to ask for help. And all this horticulture information is multiplied by our volunteer organization. Thank you.
So I'm just going to chime in a little bit about community development and emergency management. So workforce readiness, community economic development, emergency management are also priorities of yours. Something that's been near and dear to my heart throughout my entire career in Extension is building our local and regional food system. So I just want to highlight that I'm proud to announce that at Kansas State University Extension, we now have a community food systems team that's dedicated to this work statewide. And Quinlan Carter, who's here in this office in Douglas County, is very much a part of that team. In fact, that's a team that's expanding. We're actually soliciting applications for another position for that right now. And I think some of Quinlan's work is a really great testament of how the extension network sort of federally helps to inform the work locally. With a workshop, a 3-day workshop that we hosted last year right here in Lawrence. We brought in people who were starting food and farm related businesses, gave them 3 days to put their heads down, surrounded them with experts in all the areas that you might need to lean into to develop a farm or food related business. And help those businesses get off and running and into the right place. So not only are these food business resource navigators like Quinlan doing great work with one-on-one consultations with over 300 businesses across the state, they're also doing some, I think, pretty innovative work around programming. I also just want to touch base on the Call Valley Farm Tour. This fall will be the 22nd annual farm tour. So last year we had 33 farms. Most of those are in Douglas County. We have 3,000 people plus attend those farm tours. The goal being for the consumer, hey, get connected to where your food comes from. And for the farmer, hey, try to make some money. So a little bit of economic development on that front, but also lifting up and elevating the conversations around local and regional food systems. Also, just want to let you know around community leadership development. We've been hosting workshops with the Douglas County Community Foundation to strengthen our nonprofit sectors. So about 6 months ago, about 3 months ago, we hosted a couple of workshops with 80 plus people, with 30 plus organizations from right here in Douglas County represented. And then finally, we serve as the lead agency for ESF 11. I was just in contact with your staff earlier this week. Today's a deadline for rewriting a lot of our emergency management plans. And so I was working with Joshua on that, in fact, just yesterday. So I hope you got a fair glimpse of the breadth of the work that we do. I hope that we were able to illustrate that the work that we do is very much in line with your priorities and the things that you care about. I do want to take just a second and say I'm really thankful for the maintenance department on the fairgrounds. Every year, our Extension Council Executive Board names an Extension Appreciation Award winner, and last year they were the recipients. I suspect they should be the recipient perennially, but for some reason that's not in the rules. So we were happy to be able to acknowledge that team. We worked very closely with them on a lot of different things, not the least of which is the big things that happen that are extension related on the fairgrounds, but also just the maintenance of our building and the work that we get to do with them. But thank you too for your support and the relationship that we have with you all individually and with your staff. It's priceless and very meaningful to our work. We're interested in certainly continuing our efforts to engage in the things that you care about, but also developing new ideas around how we might actually find new and better things to do together.
Well, I'd say, speaking for myself, this makes me very happy to hear Extension kind of come in and brag about yourselves. I've wanted this for a long time because I know a lot of this good work that you do, but I always want to make sure that everybody knows this great work. And I feel like a lot of Extension, because it's so partner oriented, and it's kind of the glue in a lot of things that we care about and that our community cares about. You're not always the one like taking credit, but instead giving credit to partners. But I just want to make sure that people know how much circles back through Extension. So I was very excited to have this conversation and hear these great updates.
You may not have the numbers on you, but can you tell me how many people participate in 4-H?
So we we have a traditional enrollment program where we reach about 300 kids each year. Our enrollment will officially close. Well, it doesn't ever officially close. It'll close on May 1 for kids that want to exhibit at the county fair. So that will, I've got a little bit before then. So, but it's usually around 300. But then we also reach youth outside of that traditional enrollment program, whether it's through the schools or partnering with other youth organizations throughout the community as well.
I've heard some kids that go on that Washington trip talk on the radio, and they're very well spoken, and I think they're learning some good skills there.
Yes, thank you.
They're always impressive when they get to come here too. They certainly are much better spoken than I am, and I put us to shame.
I feel like CWF Washington alumni should raise their hand at this point. So, right. So,
Yes, yeah, and we appreciate you guys letting them come and talk to you very much.
I do always really enjoy those opportunities, and I didn't get to raise my hand, but I've been long aware of it and had friends who've participated in it over generations, and think it's a really important program. I'm curious, I appreciated that you highlighted what your sort of favorite thing or what you think is most important is that civic engagement, like the actual practical application of it. And to go to DC and be able to engage in, the federal government and see, from that perspective is huge. I'm curious throughout the year, or you mentioned, a lot of preparation that goes into that. Like, what are some of the other examples of how civic engagement is sort of taught and applied? Are there other examples of how you all are doing that locally? I mean, we just highlighted that you come and talk with the county commission on occasion, but I'm curious about other activities besides that sort of benchmark trip.
Yeah. So the whole program lasts about 18 months. And so fundraising is a big piece of it, but then each month we try to have either a guest speaker. Sometimes the kids will go out and tour facilities. One year, Jamie brought the kids here and gave the kids a tour of the courthouse. Jamie also comes and talks to the kids every year about the election process. And of course, he does a fabulous job. I think it's great for the kids to really understand. I think this is where they can really understand the importance of voting and how it's really effective. Not the local, really impactful at the local and county level, but even at that state or national level. He just does a really good job of talking to the kids about that. And Patrick has come and talked to the kids about what you guys do here and how he has just even if you want to become a public official, what does that look like, right? So a lot of our speakers are usually a public servant. So they're always able to talk to the kids about why they wanted to do it, what that process looked like, and then how they are currently and actively involved. The kids this year, we actually townships, I think, oftentimes get left out. Like, that's not something the kids are actively thinking about. And so this year we were able to have a presenter come from one of the townships to talk to the kids about what they do and what that looks like. So we try to pull in city commissions or mayors. We're really trying to pull in people from all different aspects of that local, county, and state government to talk to the kids. Our state application of this program, we have a state program called Citizenship in Action. And so the kids will go to Topeka overnight. They are given a bill that they have to learn about. They are also given, if they are a representative or a senator, they workshop all afternoon on those, and then they get to go to the Capitol in the evening when nobody is there, and they get to go onto the House or Senate floor and debate that bill. The following day, then we meet with our legislators. And this year was a phenomenal year because they actually debated the cell phone bill. And the following day, that's what the House was going to be voting on. So it was super exciting to watch those kids really get into it, and then able to actually talk with their senator or representative about how they feel about it. And the fact that they talk to the kids, will tell me how you feel about it. So it was just a really good, that was spot on real world application for those kids. So yeah, those are
Yeah,
just some of the things
that's
we do.
awesome. Thank you for sharing those anecdotes. I think, yeah, it's such a cool program to highlight. And I didn't realize that it was actually 18 months long. So that's fantastic that there's such a breadth of opportunity to really dig into different issues and the different layers of government. And yeah, Kansas sure likes its forms of governments. There are many, don't forget rural water districts, cemetery districts. Yeah, I think that program is really cool, and civic engagement is obviously so critical and important. And so I think I can probably speak pretty comfortably for us that we always welcome any opportunity at Douglas County for them to get to know what different departments do. And, aside from elected officials, what public service workers are doing and committing their careers and their skill sets to. It's really, really cool work. Another question I had was about the sort of the workforce development thread and themes, and it shows up in a few different places. I'm curious. Certainly, some of that programming is maybe driven a lot by the university, and sort of similar and themed throughout all the different statewide programs. I'm curious if there's any direct connection to like Kansas Workforce One or other workforce state agencies or departments that you all as a team have any sort of direct conduit to in terms of additional programming or opportunities to tap into funding that might support different workforce development for youth in particular.
That's a great question, Commissioner Reed. I think I would say no, not directly. So we've got connections to traditional workforce development agencies, and in fact, just 6 or 7 months ago, and even before that, as we started to see relatively massive layoffs from federal agencies. It's actually a conversation I had with Sarah. It was like, well, we should probably be prepping and preparing for a potential influx of displaced workers. And so we did have those conversations. But, I think what I would say is like our sort of workforce development efforts are probably, they don't look or smell like a traditional workforce development effort.
That helps. I appreciate the context.
I was real interested in reading your strategic plan, and I really like the situation statements in each one of them. I think that shows a certain level of vulnerability on what we could be doing better. So thank you for that. I'm interested in how you informed each one of those areas. What was your public engagement like? Yeah.
So that answer for this strategic plan is the same as it was for the last, which is we did this on a shoestring budget. We were unable to secure an external contractor to really conduct something in the way of meaningful external engagement. However, we did have somebody on the front end who helped us engage broadly across our volunteers. So we were able to obviously secure the input from our 24-member extension council, but also our staff, and then the 400 volunteers that we have. And that's really where we stopped it. I mean, we weren't able to foot the bill for anything that was more meaningful and large, broad scale public engagement.
Thanks. And then I noticed there's the 4 areas, and one of them was economic development. And I'm interested in how the Extension Council defines economic development.
Yeah, I don't know that we've necessarily formally defined it, but I can maybe give you a sense of what that looks like in practical application. So the reason you see it there is because you see it in the statute. And so that Extension Council law from the early 50s talks about community and economic development. Our director of extension at the state would say we started this institution as an economic development institution. It just similar to workforce development, doesn't look like traditional economic development agency work. But working with agricultural producers on the issues that they're facing in their fields to reduce their input prices or input costs, as Margit is doing today, or helping them identify and more accurately treat the plagues that are in their fields, is very much economic development. I mean, obviously, sustainability in general is focused on three platforms, and economics is one of them. So I think there's an element there that kind of the work that we do has always historically been oriented in that way. But I think also just in terms of like the work that we've done in the past with you all around our e-community, and we continue to do that work with the e-community. I know Quinlan is very much a piece of those conversations with Jill, as well as like the more pressing issue of the World Cup impending upon our community, and thinking about what we can do around equipping food-based businesses with the tools that they need to maybe culturally address the audiences that we may expect here is very much economic development. That entire local regional food system work. So I see Commissioner Willie's water bottle, I think it is, that has the logo for the food system that the Food Policy Council developed in 2017 when I was the chair of the Food Policy Council. Is all about economic development, and so that's part and parcel to our work. It's one word that you don't necessarily see on a banner around extension work. In Kansas, we have some peers across the country who do maybe a little more directly do economic development, but traditional economic development in Kansas is done elsewhere.
I'd be interested in continuing that conversation, because when we think about, maintaining, preserving some of our natural resources, sometimes that comes in conflict with another value around growth. And I'm more making a statement than offering a question here. I think there's an opportunity for Extension to get involved in that conversation with, whether it's the Economic Development Council or the Chamber, or whoever that is. I don't know, maybe some of you were involved in the Chamber's recent feasibility study. And so I'm just interested. It's been my perception that we need more voices engaged in the economic development discussion than we're getting, and just think that might be an interesting, that's why I was interested in what Extension's role is, and is there a possibility for maybe a broader role or another voice in that?
I think so. I'd be more than happy to have further conversations with you about that. I don't think we've shied away from, particularly around land use related issues. And so if there's something that we can lend that would be helpful, I think we stand ready to do that.
Often our agricultural sector as an economic driver in our community kind of needs champions, needs translators, because a lot of folks that work in town don't have that kind of intuitive knowledge. So I think Extension is a great place to be a connector around those conversations. Reed mentioned water districts, and I would say the go-to for the map for that, should you choose to, is in that land stewardship book, along with many other things that I reference as a commissioner. So I think I probably picked it up at Extension when it first came out, and I've used it a lot. So it's a great publication. All of the others are too, but I say that's my kind of go-to for a quick map, or kind of keeping track of what's in there. So.
To pull on the sort of Commissioner Kelly's economic development questions and that thread a little bit, I'm curious, if there are any ways in which through different programs that Extension Council is trying to clock for or track those sorts of outcomes. So for example, this isn't exactly economic development, but it's a small example. You had in here the dollar value of volunteer contributions. That's just one way. But I'm curious if there are other ways you've tried to either that you have concrete, dollars that you can speak to as a result of some of the programs that have generated in the economy, or representations of that in some other ways. So one example that comes to mind is you highlighted part of the Kaw Valley Farm Tour is opportunity for growers and producers to attract new customers, to maybe have a good money weekend as the season is winding down otherwise. So I'm just curious if there are any of those measures that you all have thought to start clocking for, just as some concrete examples of how direct programming is bringing more dollars in terms of sales tax dollars, right? And also, like, if ag producers are able to talk about the fact that the the programming they implemented with or tools and resources that they leveraged from the extension helped increase yields, decrease, output expenses, those types of things.
Great question. Again, Commissioner Reed, I think on an individual basis, yeah, like, so we can get those sort of testimonials that might have, so the implications on an individual, I'd say collectively, we're not strong there. We had a board chair not too long ago who was calling for that kind of aggregate information. And, that individual was, part of an organization that had like an analyst and, just like this, I think a really pretty strong suite of professionals who were there to kind of formulate a lot of that. Having said that, we do know how much money people spend at the Call Valley Farm Tour. We know that an average visitor spends $120, and they do that over three and a half farms. And so we can make assumptions about how good that is. Now, there are some farms that do better than others, obviously, but generally speaking, I think we have some direct knowledge about some of the things like that. I think a big issue that we run up against when it comes to this kind of stuff, when we talk about outcomes, we talk about short, medium, and long-term outcomes. And the short-term outcomes are just like a knowledge change. So we've created a change in somebody's awareness of a practice or a new scientific approach, or just increase awareness. And so the medium-term outcomes are about behavior change. And so that's really where maybe there could be some economic impact to the work that we do, maybe a little bit. And then the longer term stuff is really more environmental and economic in nature. And so the idea of kind of like having a sense of like what our ag program has done to, sequester carbon across the county, like that's a tough one over time. And frankly, we may have some scientists on staff in Manhattan who can help us with that kind of information, but we're not equipped at the local level, generally speaking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I appreciate you thinking out loud with us about it, Marlon, because I just think that to Commissioner Kelly's point, like, well, maybe this isn't entirely your point. I'm pulling on it a little bit. I think economic development is so many things, and it means so many different things to different people based on the position they hold, the perspectives they have, the experiences of their lifetime, and the experiences that they have no perspective about or no insight to, right? And so we all, it's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot and means a lot of different things. And so I think it's healthy for us as a community and amongst all the partners, and as has been highlighted here, Extension being, this hub of so many different types of programming and opportunities that really touch a lot of, lives, touch a lot of sectors and fields. And so there's a lot of opportunity there, I think, to just recenter on that part of the conversation and how we are thinking, like, what are the ways that we talk about economic development? What does it mean to different people? And is it only about, growth of a tax base, or is it also about, viability of people's generational family businesses and farms? And it's just a lot of things, and lots of your programming clearly touch those spaces. So I'll be interested to continue some of those conversations about how you all are thinking, what your role and the programs that you are helping bolster in the community play to the positive of economic development on a countywide level.
Well, I know. So thank you for the acknowledgement that it is sort of embedded across all the work. And I do want to shout out, and I know we're almost out of time. We have the chair of the Master Gardeners here. So one of the things that Sharon talked about was their fundraising efforts. So the native plant sale, totally a fundraising effort. There was a little bit in the written report about the contribution that those Master Gardeners have made back to community because of their success in securing funding. So it helps them do their work. But if it's permissible, Diane Oakes is here, if she could address you for just a moment.
I think I might say no to that just because we really are close on time.
Okay.
And I know I've got one more question, and so I'm going to selfishly reserve time for that. But I want to check in and see if other commissioners have further questions about any of the programs that we've heard about. Did you have something more you want to say? So to the strategic plan, and I liked the layout of it too, and the those statements I thought were really impactful. I was zeroing in on the two of the sort of thematic areas, the broadening representation and communications. And certainly I read what was in here, but I just kind of wanted to give some space to hear from you all about how you're thinking or ways in which you've already tried to assess for who are the underrepresented populations. Have you been able to identify that, or is that a thing that you're working to identify and zero in on where to sort of target more of your programming? And then to sort of piggyback off that, the to be known and trusted, I thought was a really pretty powerful and intentional statement and concise, and I appreciate that. And I wanted to offer an opportunity for you all to sort of elaborate on that. And again, how you have been able to assess or how you intend to assess how well you are known or how well different programs are known, because I'm sure it really varies a lot, right? And you're known in different spaces, and some folks know a few of you, but not all of you, and some folks only know one of you. And by folks, I mean organizations and community partners and whatnot. So I'm just curious to hear how you're thinking from a holistic point of view, how to assess for those things to determine kind of what the baseline and status quo is, and identify where you're going to go.
Yeah, so this is a question that we always answer in our budget application to you every year about ensuring equity. So because there are federal funds that make their way to us through Kansas State University, one of the things that we do is collect demographic data from all of our program participants, if they're willing to share. And so one of the results of collecting all that information, this is where we do, I think, a pretty good job on data and reporting, is parity calculations, just to ensure and check and see where we are every year within programs and across programs. So that's a bit of the information that our Extension Council Executive Board sees with us. And so whenever we see if we're not meeting parity, if we're not appropriately addressing within a demographic, we know that we've got some work to do there. So we get baseline perennially. And so that helps us kind of move the needle. And then I think around the second element of your question, which was more on, how are we measuring to what degree we're known and trusted? Those are difficult, I think relatively difficult words by themselves, but what we've done is just kind of look at the metrics of, how many organizations are we partnering with, and how many people are participating in our existing programs. So those are the metrics we have around communications that hopefully do tie into the degree of which we're known and trusted. And I think a piece of that too is just, around social media, what's our followership? And we get those reports from our communications coordinator with some frequency. What's the distribution? What's our contact list within our CRM look like? And I think those are elements of that too.
Thanks. That helps. And I really did zero in on the word trusted. I really appreciate that that's something that is a desire that you all are striving to be trusted. I think, to your point, it's difficult to assess how people trust or don't trust you, why they may not trust you if they're willing to acknowledge that for any reason, right? But I think that it is important to acknowledge that I think that's a powerful statement, and one that I appreciate and that I hope will feel fruitful for you all in sort of unpacking and assessing what that means and increasing trust. And, I think that in community organizing, you talk about how like the development of anything good, any good policy, any good progress only happens at the speed of trust. And so it is important work to be able to identify if and where there might be a breakdown of that, or even just a perceived mistrust, right? And to be able to hold space for identifying that and naming it and figuring out how to move past it and how to increase where, like, know where you are trusted and know where partnerships have been really strong and reliable and opportunities have grown out of those. And really lean on that, I think, as a model to keep replicating that. And that brings me, I have one more question for you, Caitlin. I wanted to come back to, you mentioned the loss of federal funding, which I appreciate you highlighting. It's always important, I think, for us to know when and where that's happening with different partners. And you specifically mentioned that that's been reliable funding for decades. 30 plus years. So do you care to elaborate a little bit about kind of where you all are at right now with how it, the impact certainly must be significant. Have you been able to determine strategies for enveloping any of that programming, kind of folding it in and still continuing it while minimizing or eliminating other things? Or is that a strategy you're still kind of trying to figure out how you might be able to continue that? And if you want to elaborate on what the direct impact is, like what stopped happening because that funding stopped coming, I think that'd be helpful to hear.
For sure. I think the reality is, if I were to be super frank, that was a loss of close to $150,000 in grant funding. That was honestly pretty easy for me to apply and get. It is competitive, but if you're good stewards with the dollars, you report. Historically, that's been what I consider stable federal grant funding, which is not something we'll likely say in the future. We have learned that. But the reality is that is 2 FTEs for nutrition educator positions on our team, and the amount of work they were able to do and serve. So we did experiment for a short stint with one position, attempting to approach community partners, the same partners we were working with in the past, and ask for a fee for service. Can you imagine how that went? I mean, they're all like us, right? They don't have a lot of extra money at their hands to spend on programming. So we had a few wins there, but we also found that it wasn't a lucrative opportunity for us to garner that fee for service situation, unfortunately. So it is a loss. Today, we're still exploring what that looks like. The reality is there is no nutrition ed happening in our community because of staffing capacity. If you look at those pictures, there's not a lot of faces on our paid staff team. And unfortunately, that just hasn't been there. That grant, in addition to paying the 2 FTEs, also paid for supplies and food. We know food isn't getting any cheaper either. So we were able to experiment for a short stint, like I said, learned some things in that process. But the reality is, even to cover the cost of food was really the minimal commitment that most of our community partners were able to come to the table with. And I get that, right? And I work with a lot of these folks and have for many years. And to even have that conversation, like, hey, do you have any money to at least cover the food? That was a difficult ask to make. And we know that the populations that we're intending to serve with nutrition ed, they're not people that have money in their back pocket to come to the table to pay with that either.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. I appreciate it. Do you have something more?
Yeah, I would just add, I think a piece of the impact of that goes to what you were asking about, Commissioner Reed, related to our ability to expand our reach. So we have a whole, a very rich program historically that was able to tap into low-income audiences that has gone poof. And so that has an impact on our ability to do the reaching into the community that we've historically worked with and helped. But, I think the biggest impact is on that community specifically around figuring out healthful ways to stretch their limited food dollars. So, and which plays directly into elements of the community health improvement plan. So just make sure that we point to that. Like, we had 2 FTEs, we're out there doing that hard work, boots on the ground, working with low-income folks to figure out how to healthfully stretch their limited food dollars. That work's not happening anymore.
Thank you. Appreciate you coloring that picture in a little bit more. Commissioners, any other questions? Well, we really appreciate the work you do, and thanks for highlighting, like Commissioner Willie said earlier, all the different ways and places and spaces that extension work reaches into the community and reaches a lot of different communities within our county. So we appreciate you. Thanks for being here. And with that, we will be recessed until our 5:30 business meeting